Spiritual abuse is basically when a person with authority uses religion or spirituality to control the other person or to misconduct themselves. The victims that fall into spiritual abuse, it's because they have a lack of knowledge or because they actually look up to the spiritual leader so much that they think that this person can do no wrong, right? If you come across somebody who is justifying some sort of oppression or sin and connecting it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's happiness, that is a red flag right there. Twisting Islamic rulings, right? So using certain Quran and Hadith to make their followers or make their students do certain things, right? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Today, inshallah, we're going to be discussing a very complex and a triggering topic, which is spiritual abuse. Spiritual abuse is basically when a person with authority uses religion or spirituality to control the other person or to misconduct themselves. And it can have, so many different repercussions and consequences. Basically, boundaries are blurred, and the sacred relationship between a teacher and student remains no more, right? And it's not because the student wanted to do something or the student was willingly involved. It's because the student is basically coerced into it. Or forced into it, and is made to think that this is going to bring me closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or this is going to make me a better Muslim. So a lot of times the victims that fall into spiritual abuse, it's because they have a lack of knowledge or because they actually look up to the spiritual leader so much that they think that this person can do no wrong, right? And they basically become blindsided by them, and they do not sit back and think that if this person is telling me to do this, is it even religious? Is there any religious background or religious evidence to it? So, that's something to really keep in mind, that just because somebody is a religious leader or religious teacher, teaching Quran, teaching Hadith, it does not mean that they can never make a mistake. And if something doesn't seem right, then how do we figure out if this is actually where I'm supposed to be or not? So today we're going to be discussing 5 points that we can, use to identify if any type of spiritual abuse is occurring or somebody around us is becoming a victim of them. Now, if you guys have any more, please do leave them in the comments. And if you guys also want to talk about, how can we address these, inshallah, let me know. And then we can make another video on that. But today I just want to keep the video short and just talk about how can we identify spiritual abuse in our community. So the very first one is actually when a spiritual leader or a religious leader is justifying something that just does not seem right, but they're using religion for it, right? So for example, we know that adultery is haram. We know that watching inappropriate content is haram. We know that eating pork is haram. Drinking alcohol is haram. Using intoxicants is haram. We also know that, a woman is supposed to wear hijab. And we also know that a man is supposed to behave a certain way. You're not supposed to have relationships out of marriage. Now, if somebody is justifying all of this and saying, no, you can do it, you'll get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's a foundational understanding of what is haram and what is halal. I understand there's a lot of controversy on some things, but sometimes it's a clear matter. This is haram, it's not, there's no way it can be justified, right? So if you come across somebody who is justifying some sort of oppression or sin and connecting it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's happiness, that is a red flag right there. And always ask for a second opinion. If something does not seem right by a religious leader, ask for a second opinion. You don't have to degrade them. You don't have to bash them, but there's nothing wrong with going and checking with somebody else. Hey, so-and-so was saying this. It just does not seem right. Is there another version of this? Is there another narrative about this? But make sure you clarify information that is not clear to you, right? So that's the first one. The second one is if there's a religious authority, a teacher, an instructor who does not let you ask certain questions that are very simple, right? So it's like a lot of times when we ask questions when it comes to religious questions, it turns into, oh my God, why are you questioning this? Are you even a Muslim? This is haram to ask. This is actually, it wouldn't fall under like the exact spiritual abuse category, but it can lead up to spiritual abuse, because a lot of times when you ask questions and you ask evidence from the religion, from Hadith and Quran, and they cannot provide it to you, but they keep on telling you to do this and do that, right? That means it's a very personal preference. That means it is a very, maybe a cultural taboo, or a cultural respect or cultural modesty that is going on. So if you ask a question and you just want, like, you're genuinely just want to know the answer, and the reply is, why are you even asking that? Then actually go and ask somebody else. And one of the things to keep in mind is, if you look in the era of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, subhanallah, the Sahaba, the companions, the Sahabiyat, the female companions, they asked every question under the sun. And Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam never said, why would you ask that? A very good example is when the Quran says that, on the day of judgment, people are going to be leaving their graves, right? And Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had mentioned that, at that time, like, it's mentioned that on the day of judgment, people will not be fully dressed. So Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she genuinely asked, Ya Rasulullah, aren't people going to look at each other? And Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that, al-amru ashaddu min dhalik, that the situation at that point, Aisha, is going to be much harsher than what it seems like. So no one's going to really have the time to look at each other with the wrong intention, right? So she asked actually a question that if somebody asked today, we're like, oh my God, who are you fooling? Why are you asking this? But Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam answered that question. She asked questions to Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam like, was there any day that was harder on you than the Battle of Uhud? Because the Battle of Uhud was when Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam lost a lot of his beloved Sahaba, and his uncle was killed in that battle. So she asked him, she said, was there any day that was harder than that? So asking these questions, and she actually got these answers. And so many of the answers that she got, or the other Sahaba got, if they had never asked those questions, we would never even know some details of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with his family, with his spouses, any intimate details. We wouldn't even know anything. So that's the second one, that if you ask questions, right, to your teacher, and those questions are like, they're shut down, or you're made fun of, like, why would you even ask that? Don't label that as spiritual abuse, but go and get answers from somewhere else, because it could be that you are genuinely asking and this person is not giving you a proper answer. Number 3 is twisting Islamic rulings, right? So using certain Quran and Hadith to make their followers or make their students do certain things, right? So for example, a very common one that's used is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in the Quran to be obedient to one's parents, right? Now, yes, be obedient to one's parents is one thing. Being forced into marrying somebody that you don't want to marry because they're being obedient to your parents, that's not religion. Right? That's not religion. Forced marriages are unacceptable in Islam for the son and for the daughter. You cannot force your child to get married to somebody. You can stop them from marrying somebody that they want to get married to because you feel like they're not a good choice. But you cannot use religion to make them do something and take a step that's going to change their life forever. Right? This is just one example. So anytime teachers, instructors, somebody with authority uses religion to push an agenda, and they kind of find these hadiths, they find these Quranic ayats to make you do something, you have to look at the context of those ayat. You have to look at the context of the hadiths. Another very important one that I have seen being used is Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that it's best for a person's deen to not get involved in something that doesn't pertain to them, right? So yes, what that means is don't be nosy. But if you're asking questions about your job, you're asking questions about your role, you're asking questions about why certain things are happening in the family and they're actually affecting you somehow, right? Don't let somebody tell you that, oh, in the hadith, you're not supposed to be nosy. That's not called being nosy. Being nosy is trying to get information that has nothing to do with you. So that's the third one, that if somebody's starting to twist Islamic knowledge or Islamic teachings into making you think that this is what you're supposed to do with it, and that's way out of context, yes, that is a sign that this person is using religion to get something done. that they cannot get done otherwise, right? So that's the third one. The fourth one is keeping somebody in isolation, right? Keeping somebody in isolation. Now, when you get to a certain age, so for example, for students, like if you're younger, if you're a minor and you're listening to this and you're under 18 or you're under 16, and your Quran teacher or your Islamic studies teacher is telling you, don't go home and tell your parents this, right? Don't discuss this with somebody. That's a red flag, right? There should be no matter discussed with a teacher and a student or any type of authority in a minor that the person is told to not go and discuss with somebody and not go and tell somebody, right? And then in adults, they can look like if you're being kept isolated, like don't listen to so-and-so sheikh. Don't listen to so-and-so Alimah. That Alimah, she's just causing fitna. That sheikh is just causing fitna. So a lot of times, this is how people are brainwashed into isolating themselves from everybody else and just following a certain, like it's basically cult mentality, right? You're just following one person and you believe that this person knows religion and nobody else does. Why? Because maybe one or two views they align with your views and nothing else does, but that doesn't really matter at that point, right? So always make sure that if somebody keeps on pushing that only they should be listened to and nobody else should be listened to, or if you're a youngster and somebody's telling you don't go home and tell your parents something, that's wrong. You need to go and you need to tell and you need to get help. And if you're an adult, you need to start thinking and reflecting on yourself that what if this person is trying to tell me all this because they want me to just follow them and look up to them and they don't want me to get mentorship from elsewhere. So that's the fourth one. And then, of course, the last one, and the list can go on and on, but the last one is when somebody does not have an answer for a personal preference, right? So let's just say that there is a certain scholar who believes that somebody should dress a certain way, or, they believe that education should only be taught a certain way. And there's no dalil, there's no evidence to prove that, right? It's just their personal preference. And when you ask them for evidence, or when you ask them that, where is this coming from? Where is this stemming from, right? There's no backup to it. And it seems like this person just cares about their reputation, right? They cares about their reputation, like they have to be known as a certain way, but they do things behind scenes and they tell you that don't go tell anybody, or the things that you're doing or the things that they're talking about just don't make sense and they don't align with basic Islamic values. That is also a red flag, right? So these are just 5 things that I wanted to talk about today, because anytime a religious abuse case or a spiritual abuse case emerges in our community, one of these boundaries are blurred. Right? One of these boundaries are blurred. The person is made into thinking that this person, this instructor is everybody, is basically has the knowledge of everybody. No, we cannot hold people, we cannot hold other human beings, whether it's a sheikh, whether it's a Alimah, whether it's even for like medicine, right? People go for second and third opinion to different doctors. Right? When it comes to religion, it's the same thing. You cannot just look at one person and think that they're everything, even if something doesn't seem right, right? So that's why that's something to keep in mind, and that's something to educate ourselves on, especially our young women, especially our young girls, that nobody should be allowed to get involved in your personal space. Nobody is allowed to blur any boundaries with you. And it's very important for us to teach our youngsters, boys and girls, actually both, what boundaries look like when it comes to religious institutions. Because in a lot of cultures, it's taboo to talk about what happens in religious institutions. Actually, in some cultures, if you talk about them, they even label it as blasphemy of Islam. But no, like there is a limit between a teacher and a student, and there are boundaries, and those boundaries have to be respected. And the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not supposed to be used. Islam is not supposed to be used to oppress and suppress people. It's actually supposed to be used to bring peace and tranquility in the community. I hope today's video resonates, and of course, this topic can go on and on. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask in the comments below. If you guys want another video on how we can address this and how we can solve this actually, and what are some steps that you can take if you have been spiritually abused, you can leave that in the comment as well. Inshallah, I'll see you guys next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.